River North.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for raising this important issue today. And I would like to take a moment to emphasize the reality that people living with accessibilities and disabilities face in British Columbians. In fact, 1 in 5 British Columbians live with a disability. Probably every single person in this room knows someone or has a loved one that is facing these similar challenges. And these disabilities are visible or invisible, each of them presenting common and distinct challenges such as barriers to accessing essential services, stigmatization, and discrimination. People living with disabilities deserve to live a full and become active members in our communities. Yet these persistent barriers meant that this goal is far from being realized. We need to improve accessibility standards at all stages of life. This means raising the standards to support people living with disabilities and or accessibility challenges, whether it be in schools, post-secondary institutions, in the workplace, in the way that we organize our society and treat others overall. As a representative of rural riding Peace River North, I've seen firsthand the issues that are facing people with disabilities and how they're exacerbated in our smaller rural communities. In fact, just a little story about a young woman. Her name is Christy Lear. She lives in Fort Nelson, and she faced a horrific accident a few years ago and had a spinal cord injury. Now, this didn't stop Christy from becoming a fierce advocate in her community and across British Columbia for people with accessibility issues, people that have disabilities. The community stepped up and wrapped around her. Christy went on to form a group called Step Up and is working with these smaller rural communities to help them become more accessible. However, the challenge that is faced by rural British Columbians is the service levels that people that live in smaller rural communities have trouble facing. In fact, sadly, Christy has had to locate most of the time living in Edmonton because she cannot get the services that she needs in Fort Nelson. Now, unfortunately, Christy's story is not isolated to Fort Nelson. This happens across British Columbians in rural and more remote communities. And the lack of specialized services for individuals with accessibility challenges is forcing them to travel long distances or to relocate altogether. The lack of transportation within and between northern communities presents a real challenge when you're facing extreme weather, mountainous roads. This even puts up more barriers for people that live in these areas to access the services that they need. The gaps in health outcomes that result from these barriers are unacceptable. Rural British Columbians continue to be neglected or ignored in many of these conversations, and the most vulnerable members of our communities, including people with disabilities, are paying the price. Honourable Speaker, also speaking of paying the price, British Columbia is one of the most expensive places to live in the entire country. We're experiencing an affordability crisis. The cost of essentials like groceries, rents, gas continue to soar. Over half of British Columbians are $200 away from insolvency. And as you can imagine, this is even more impactful with people with disabilities. Disability assistance in BC is not keeping up with the rising cost of living, and recipients of these benefits are living far below the poverty line, forcing it to make impossible decisions, like choosing between groceries or medications or the services that they need. People with disabilities have significantly higher rates of poverty and unemployment than the overall population, and the provincial government isn't providing them with all the supports that they need and that they deserve. The persistence of poverty in our communities, especially among our most vulnerable, is a clear indicator that their current approach is not working. A new direction is needed. We need to create a future where disability is not synonymous with poverty. The problem will not be solved by expanding bureaucracy without any real results to show for it. British Columbians with disabilities are tired of the endless task forces, advisory committees, We need to make sure, and it's essential, that we are standing up and supporting people with disabilities. It's not just about policies. It is about improving the lives of real people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.